What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Luke here with a Showdown live stream for round 3 at the ZOZO. Hopefully everyone is having a great Friday evening and is ready for the weekend. And one is going to be profitable. We've got golf going on early. And then on Sunday, we've got ourselves the NFL main slate too. So I'm excited for it. Let's go ahead and get you prepared here for this third round. So we'll be going through the Draftkings and the Prize Picks board. Now, Prize Picks actually doesn't have their board up yet. So we're going to go over Draftkings first, talk through the weather, what to expect from the golf course, my player pool. And then by the end, hopefully they have the golf boards up because you can see they're not up here yet. So we'll get to that a little bit later. But first, let's focus on the weather in the golf course, which here for round 2 played a lot easier than what we saw for the first round. And that was to be expected. We knew that the winds were going to be lower. They weren't dealing with nearly as much moisture, but all of that rain that accumulated on Thursday made the greens more receptive for the second round. So I thought it might play close to like a stroke, maybe a stroke and a half under par, and it was a solid 1.53 shots under par. So actually was towards the top of the spectrum where I thought it would be. So they impressed me out there. They played relatively well yesterday. Pin locations weren't all that difficult. And here for Saturday, though I think that it'll be a little bit firmer and faster, not going to be baked out by any means, but a lot of those darts that you were seeing thrown might not be quite as easy to throw here on a Saturday. But you're going to see something close to maybe a stroke under par, maybe 1.5 strokes once again. You're going to get easier pin locations for Saturday. So over here on Friday, the pins were, I'd say, about average, right? What you'd expect for a Friday. Typically for Saturday at this event, because there's so much undulation on these greens, there's also a lot of bowls. You actually saw that there for Friday's round. They had a few front pin locations that had bowls, not only from behind the pin, but also to the side. So you can miss left to right, and you were getting shots down there to 4 to 5 feet. At least on 4 of the holes that I can remember, if not more, because again, the broadcast was only on from like 11 till 3 a.m. So first off, just ridiculous that the PGA Tour isn't showing much more of this event, particularly because it's an invitational type field. I mean, we have like 8 or 9 of the top 25 in the world playing at this event. That aside, right? That's ridiculous in my opinion. From what we've seen, you've seen gettable pin locations, and then on a moving day, you're even more likely to see that sort of thing. So the scoring average, even though I think it'll be slightly harder to throw darts, might be the same, right? Because of those easier pins. And you're going to see a lot of movement, a lot of volatility. I mean, just to give you an idea, right? Mito Pereira, I'd hate to pick on the guy because, obviously had a really rough round there, shot 7 over par, but there's a reason why you should fade the guys at the top. I mean, anybody, and I mean anybody, is capable of having one of those blow-up rounds. You had somebody go from nearly first-round leader to nearly last after one day. And then on the flip side, you have players like John Huh and Andrew Putnam who went from middle of the pack to up here in the top 5 after just one day's performance. Kita Nakajima shot 7 under par, went from even up there to number 5 in terms of the rankings. You're going to see the same sort of movement here for Saturday. And that's not to be said that you couldn't see one of these players go out there and do the same thing, right? Repeat their performance, but it's a lot less likely, right? The board is pretty much even. I mean, even some of the players, I hate to say it, they're down here like +7, +6, like a Manati, Herbert, Ches Reavie, Matt Wallace up here at +2, Bazane Hood at +1. Don't count out those sort of players. They're more than capable of getting to that performance, and they're also going to be lower owned. So when we get into the strategy, we'll talk about it a little bit, but especially given that the golf course is played volatile, we need to embrace that, right? Because, I mean, look at the top of the board, right? There's not one player that went out there in round 1 shot like 4 or 5 under par, like a Shank. He had what did he shoot, like even par or something like that? Yeah, he shot even par. Let's see, Brendan Steele shot over par. I believe he shot like +3 on the day. Yeah, he shot +3. He was +6 at one point. He was one of those first round leaders. Pretty much anybody that had a good first round had a drastic, like a horrible, just absolute train wreck second round. And I think you might see that same thing happen again. So I'm not saying that I'm going to fade everybody up here in the top 10 because there are a few players that I am getting to, most notably closer to tied for 8th, right? A couple of those studs down there. I still think can go out there and shoot something like a 4 or 5 under par like Holman did. I think that's reasonable. But for some of these value tier options, like a John Huh, Bradley, Putnam, Ricky Fowler, I wouldn't be counting on them going out there and doing that same sort of thing, right? And ownership's going to reflect that. People think that they're going to. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. In terms of the weather, you're looking at even easier weather conditions than what we had for Friday. So it was closer to 13 to 15 miles an hour of sustained winds. Now that's closer to 12 down to 8 miles an hour. I believe they're teeing off right around like noon over there. Actually, a little bit earlier, like 9, 10 a.m. local time over there. And they're finishing up right around like 3 to 4 p.m. because it actually gets dark right around like 5 p.m. in Japan, which is crazy to me. It's just the different time zones. I don't know. I don't want to go into the physics of it, but it gets dark really early there. So they try and finish by right around like 4:35 p.m. And it's going to be really easy conditions, right? 8 mile an hour wind, sustained winds, wind gusts that are only 1 mile an hour higher, 8 or 9 miles an hour, should be pristine. And then with those moving day pins, I think you're going to see plenty of ceiling rounds. Let's hop over to the player poll now, see what's going on. So let me share my screen, bring up our projections. There we go. Now, just to bring it up on the live stream for y'all, and we'll talk through some of my top plays. There we go. Sweet. So got the projection sheet up. Let's go to the top of the board. And anytime you have a round 3 showdown, there's a few things that we need to focus on. So first and foremost, the chalk. It's always going to hunker around the guys at the top of the board. So you've already kind of touched on it, but a lot of those value tier options like a Ricky Fowler, John Huff, for example, Andrew Putnam are going to be 10 to 15% owned, if not 20 to 30% if they're one of the top tier options. And to this point, the only guys that are really getting steamed like that, I guess, would be a Keegan Bradley. He's getting a ton of ownership at $9,100 because of his position on the leaderboard. Guys like a Morikawa and Hovland are the hot topics in the 9K range because of their position on the leaderboard. And of course, Xander Schauffele, though he's not at the top of the board, he's in a better position than a Sungjae Im and a Tom Kim. So he's the one getting all the attention up top. So for me, just when you're trying to take pivots up here and considering that all the guys up here from $9,000 plus are, I don't want to say on the same level of talent because, you know, maybe Mito Pereira, Keegan Bradley, you bump down to the tier below. But, you know, a Fleetwood, Cam Young, Morikawa, Hovland, all of these sort of players, maybe except for Xander, I think he's on that elite of the elite tier out there on the PGA Tour. They're all like all-star level players, right? They're, you know, top 10, top 15% at the very worst sort of players on the PGA Tour, and all capable of going out there and just destroying a field or destroying a venue on any given 18 holes. So for me, I'm going to focus on the lower owned options. That is a Sungjae Im for me. Also, Hideki Matsuyama. We'll talk about Hideki here in a second, but with Sungjae, he looks close. And I was worried about fatigue coming in. And though he's used to playing every week on the PGA Tour, you know, they finished up there at the Shriners on Sunday night. They had to go the whole way over to Japan. And then with the time difference, essentially lost an entire day. There's going to be the jet lag factor they get used to. And I know he travels internationally all the time, plays in a lot of these Asian Tour events. No matter how much you do it, it still sucks, right? Because you get acclimated to the new time zone. Your circadian rhythm adapts to the situation that you're in. And I thought he would struggle. I thought that was a good reason to fade him this week because maybe he wouldn't be as sharp physically as you'd hope that he would be. And that has kind of bared out to this point. But he's had a few days, right? He's going to get more and more acclimated to being over there in Asia. And just from a top level perspective, I love him at the CJ Cup. That's his home field event. He's going to be completely acclimated to being in that sphere of the world. Love him next week. That's first off. But second off, love him here for round 3 showdown because I also think that he's going to see an improved wellness factor. And it's a little bit speculative, but in either circumstance, he's lower owned than the guys around him. He's essentially the same level player. And going into the week, he was 33% owned. He was the chalk of all the chalk. And now he's average in terms of ownership, right? 23.9% isn't like, you know, it's nothing to scoff at. It's still way up there, right? He's one of the higher owned players on the slate, but he's no longer this amazing piece of chalk that you have to avoid because he's 35, 40% owned. That kind of player now is a Xander Schauffele. It's also a Victor Hovland or a Colin Morikawa. So, you know, there's a few of them that I'm getting to. I don't want to give away my entire player pool here. If you want to see it, it is on the Patreon as per usual. But it's more the lower owned options that are essentially the same players as the guys around them. And Hideki Matsuyama fits that same description, except it goes a little bit further with him because you also want to include his motivation factor. You know, he's even par. You may argue that guys like a Mito Pereira, maybe a Tommy Fleetwood, Terrell Hatton there at even par would be a little bit less engaged than those that are like Xander at -4. You know, Victor and Colin Morikawa are in the thick of the golf tournament, but that's not necessarily the case for Hideki, right? He's the hometown guy, literally has Tiger-like crowds behind him every single shot for Hideki is going to be like a life or death sort of situation. He's going to live and die by every single shot. If it's not perfect, you're going to see that one-armed finish. And I love that about a Showdown play. And I love it about a play in general when it comes to DFS. When my players are engaged, you may argue that it brings nerves and whatnot, but he overcame them last year and won. The first time he came here, he finished in second place. I'm not really all that worried about it, right? Sure, he's had a little bit of a rough start, but he's more than capable of finding it over the weekend, maybe even winning this event. I actually, I don't know. I got a week for him about it. I'm playing him in Showdown. I'm not going to bet him outright, but if he ends up winning at the end of the week, I told you so. That's all I'm going to say about it. Let's move down a little bit further. These guys at -5 are going to get owned, but I think they're fine enough plays. They're not being owned enough to where I have to avoid them, right? They're not going to be like 35% chalk, 40% chalk in the large field GPPs. Now in single entries, 2 to 3 maxes, they might be owned in that sort of range. But if you're playing in the large field GPP, you put them in half of your lineups, you can probably feel okay about the leverage. If you play like 60, 65%, you can feel pretty comfortable about being at least 2x the field. So I do like both of those plays. Just want to go on record as saying so. But if you want to see the exact ownership levels to see how much you need to put in your lineups to get 2x, those are, that's why by the way, for Showdown, by the way, if you're playing Showdown, I'm the only person that puts out ownership projections for them. If you're just joining my Patreon for anything, that's worth it alone right there, right? Let alone what I do for the main slates, what I'm doing for prize picks, all that, Discord, all that sort of fun stuff. Just the ownership projections alone for Showdown, I think are worth the $10 a month subscription on that alone, let alone all the other stuff I offer. So if you're looking for that, that's exactly where you find it. If you want to get 2x on Hideki, right, you put him in 35% of your lineups. You put Sanjay in like half of your lineups, and you feel pretty good about your leverage to the field. You have to be a little bit more aggressive about a Hideki, sorry, not about a Hideki, a Hovland and a Morikawa there. Mito Pereira, if you want a really low-owned play, you could probably get to him. Now, I think it's a little bit more risky than trying to take like a Hideki, for example, or a Tommy Fleetwood that we're going to talk about here in a second, but I don't think it's crazy. Cam Young had an okay day. He didn't kill you if you played him. I had him in quite a few of my higher dollar contests yesterday, but he didn't help you either, right? -3 was, what, a shot and a half better than the field average. You had guys shooting 8, 9 under par, like a John Huh, Andrew Putnam out there. So it was an okay round, but I do think that he's going to garner attention. You know, he was 28% owned going into the week in the $5 GPP. He was like 20% owned in Showdown yesterday. He's probably going to be like 25, 30% again. It's just, you have to love Cam Young to get to him. And I loved him yesterday. And it didn't hurt us. It just didn't help us all that much either. I'm not sure I'm going to get there. I don't know. He could go out there, shoot a 7, 8 under par round. I'm just going to have to live with it because I don't love him nearly as much as I need to get that leverage. I'd rather invest, quite frankly, into a Morikawa or Hovland. But if you're looking for somebody that's slightly lower owned, again, you could probably play Cam Young in half of your lineups and get leverage to him. I just have prior investments to worry about when it comes to Cam Young. Keegan Bradley's a fade. I'm very confident saying that, to be honest with you. He's just super highly owned. We know Keegan Bradley's more than capable of going full Keegan. That's why we have a term for it. So anytime he's going to get steamed up, he's coming in off a top tier performance or ceiling performance, as some of us would put it, I'm going to fade it. It's like a hard, fast rule that I have. I'm not going to think about it any more than that, especially when we have a Tommy Fleetwood who's $100 less expensive, and he's 6.4% owned, which on last run, I believe, was 4 times less owned than Keegan Bradley. If you're going to tell me that Tommy Fleetwood is 4 times less likely to succeed than Keegan, you're full of it, right? And just to remind everyone out there, I try to say this every time we have a Saturday Showdown, there aren't any placement points. It's all about just your raw scoring, right? You're going out there making birdies. If you're getting streaks, if you're getting a bogey-free round, that's what contributes to your score, not your position on the leaderboard, right? So if you're in dead last place, you're plus 40 to start the round, but you shoot a -10 bogey-free round with a streak, all that sort of fun stuff, yeah, you're going to be in the nuts lineup, right? You could still be plus 30. That's not going to matter, right? Because those placement points aren't going to matter anything. So, and of course, it doesn't have to be taken to that extreme. It could be like shooting 4 or 5 under par, being in last place, still being in last to end the day. Those sort of players make it into the off bowl, particularly because they're cheaper than a lot of their peers, right? When you're starting at the bottom of the board, the Draftkings algorithm bumps down your price. If you guys didn't know that, that is a factor that they use in their pricing. They also factor in ownership. So if you're a higher owned player, they raise up your price. If that's something you haven't noticed, start to pay attention to it. It's something that's highly correlated. And if you're a low owned play, they bump you down in the pricing. So it's not really rocket science when it comes to their algorithm. It's relatively predictable. In fact, if you wanted to run projected prices before the slate, you probably could, and you'd be relatively accurate. Tommy Fleetwood, though, and they do it in the middle of the slate. So this is something else that's really funny. They do the analysis like dead in the middle of tee times. So if it's an AM PM stack, they'll do it right when the PM wave starts. They'll run their projections because you can tell some of the guys that are having ceiling rounds early in the day get bumped up, whereas the guys in the PM that haven't teed off kind of don't have an effect there. But another circumstance, though, right? Guys like Keegan Bradley are more expensive now than they were before because of his performance. And Tommy Fleetwood is kind of the same price, right? He wasn't affected all that much. I get a very average round yesterday, whereas Keegan Bradley went off early and started off hot, right? So he got that bump early in the projection algorithm. Tommy Fleetwood here, just kind of sitting there at 6.4%. I love him. I honestly think that he's a much better player than Keegan. He's a better player than Mito Pereira. And you could argue that Tommy Fleetwood, when he's in form, which at this point he is, right? He's top 6 in my total model ranking. He's like the same kind of guy as a Morikawa and Hovland, right? He's that sort of player, right? At major championships, he's going to contend. I think he's perennially underrated, particularly because he's +1 at this point, right? Hasn't put in all that sharp through the first 2 rounds. Absolutely love myself some Tommy Ladd. I see we got a comment down there we'll touch on. What's going on, Nick? Nick says, I feel like Munoz has an 8 under in him, and you don't want to miss it. Yeah, so I played him for prize picks. He lost to Chad Ramey, which is ridiculous. Chad Ramey made 8 birdies yesterday. Sebastian made 7 and lost to him in a birdie or better matchup. Yeah, I like him. Yeah, we'll talk about it a little bit. I'm looking for just those low-owned diamonds in the rough, right? So Sebastian, $7,900. He would qualify as one of those players. Emiliano Grillo, he's not getting a ton of ownership. Sepp Straka, you could argue that same, Corey Connors, the same sort of thing. And Corey Connors, the thing I like about him too, kind of like a Munoz, Corey shot -3. He got back to even par. And then Munoz, he shot -3. He got it to -1. So they went from over par, kind of a little bit dejected, to now, if they shoot like 5 or 6 under par today, they're in the top 5. They have a huge incentive to not only be aggressive, but to also move in the right direction, because they go from winning like a couple $100,000. They're in like 20th to 30th place. The top 5 here is winning at least, I think, like 600, 700K. It's a large purse because it's an invitational event. Yeah, they're going to have incentive. So yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Nick. There's a lot of those guys that you can get to in that mid tier that are aggressive, like a Munoz. Now, I think I'll say about Connors, he's a little bit less aggressive, right? He's not quite as much of a madman as Munoz. So I think Munoz is a little bit of a better play than Corey Connors, but I still like both of them. Let's talk about a few other plays like Sahith Theegala that fits that same sort of skill set. Now he's -2, right? So a little bit better on the leaderboard. He's gone way under the radar. Blech, can't speak. Let me get my coffee in me. We're talking a little bit too fast. Let's calm down a little bit. Sahith Theegala, though, he was low owned going into the week, which a lot of people pointed out there right on Wednesday. And he was going overlooked, and it didn't really make sense. And I completely agreed. I played him in my 4-round contest. Struggled day one, so I was like, oh, maybe that's why he was low owned. People knew something that I didn't know about the kid, right? Of course not, right? It was just a case of having a bad round. He rebounded nicely there on Friday, and he's still low owned. I have him at 8%, right? Like if he's going to be overlooked, I just have to jump on the train because we know he's a high upside player. And in Showdown, I'm looking for aggressive players that are volatile, that have a 6 or 7 under round in them. Sahith Theegala, guys like Sebastian Munoz, like Nick just talked about down there, are those sort of guys, right? That have that ceiling round in them. So yeah, I like them a whole lot, like Sahith Theegala. Let's see. We talked about Corey. We talked about Sepp Straka. They're also, a little bit further down the leaderboard, but they're being overlooked. They still have a ceiling round in them. We talked about Griot. Kurt Kitayama is another low-owned pivot that I'm getting to. Going into the week, he was like 16 to 20% owned, depending on what GBP you're in, which is well higher than a lot of people projected, including myself. So he's getting steamed by the community. He seems to be a little bit of a community favorite is probably the best way to put it. Getting a little bit of extra steam every single tournament that he tees it up. which I understand. He's volatile. He makes a ton of birdies. He outscores his placement position when it comes to his DraftKings scoring. And in Showdown, that's kind of what we're looking for, right? That's Sebastian Munoz kind of role. Kurt Kitayama is like Sebastian Munoz 2 years ago, where he wasn't really that clean of a player. He's going to lose strokes around the green. He's not very consistent both on approach and with the putter, but he has those spike performances. And you always say to yourself, if this guy could clean it up, just be a little bit more consistent, he's going to start making cuts and contending in tour events. And that's what you've seen from Sebastian Munoz. That's what you've seen from Sahith Theegala, right? He's just a little bit inexperienced, right? He's going to get it eventually. This is his first year with a tour card. A lot of people don't know this. Last year, he didn't even have tour status. He was able to play as much as he did because he was finishing in the top 10 so often, getting sponsorship invites because he was that impressive when he was making tour starts, and earned a tour card through the starts that he was getting in that fashion, which is rare. And I feel like that wasn't talked about enough because that speaks volumes about his long-term ability. So I really like Kurt Kitayama, particularly because he kind of struggled yesterday. I don't think a lot of people are going to play him that much. Nick says you'd never have to talk you into Theegala. Yeah, I love it. He's a great kid too. You love to root for him. And Nick says thoughts on Lipsky. He's kind of like a Kurt Kitayama V2. So I didn't put a ton of thought into Lipsky, to be quite frank, but maybe I should have, because everything I just said about Kurt Kitayama, you could say about Lipsky, aside from the fact that he got his tour card in that sort of fashion. But he's an aggressive player. He's liked by the community. And to this point, he's kind of struggled. So let's see, what's he costing at this point, Lipsky? I had to have gone past him. He's not that cheap. Wait, where's David Lipsky on my spreadsheet? Oh, I'm blind. Bro, I have to have him on here. I have all 78 players. Let's see. Lipsky, let's search. What? What's his price, Nick? Just put it down in chat. I'll get to him later. I don't know where he is on my spreadsheet. I'm blind or something, apparently. I know he's on there because I've played him in my 4-round lineups. But I like him. Everything you said about Kitayama, you can say about David Lipsky, right? He's an aggressive player, solid iron player, trending in the right direction, and should be relatively low owned because he's not at the top of the leaderboard. What's his price? Did you put it down there? Because, dude, I swear I'm blind. 6,500. That's why he's way down there. Why is he so cheap? Yeah, you have to play him. That's way too cheap. I thought he'd be at least like $7,500. That's why I couldn't find him on my sheet there. Yeah, you have to play him. That's way too cheap. And if he wasn't on my player pool, by the way, if it's on Patreon, I can't remember off the top of my head. Definitely know that that's going to be a yes. And he's probably going to be like 15-20% owned for me. I didn't realize he was $6,500. I mean, that's $100 more than Takumi Kanaya. It's the same price as Ches Reavie, who's been dog shit to this point. $100 less than Luke List, than Dylan Fratelli. Yeah, like, come on. Like, I know he's been inconsistent, but we've also seen some spike rounds from my boy Lipsky. So good catch on that, dude. That's a little bit ridiculous. He said you love Lipsky. He's $6,500. That's awesome. Anyways, Sex says, how about that Jaeger guy? He always has that one round where he shoots just like 7 birdies. Yeah, you're right. Steven Jaeger is a volatile mofo, and you guys are all kind of naming these same sort of players. He's that same type of mold, right? Where like he's just volatile as hell. He's young. He bleeds strokes in around the green sometimes with Steven Jaeger, and he's also not the best off the tee player. So they all have these little gripes that they deal with, but when they can go out there and figure it out off the tee, or with Kurt Kitayama, figure it out with the putter, or with somebody like David Lipsky, figure it out off the tee, kind of similar to what you have there, they have ceiling rounds, right? And they make 7-8 birdies. They are somebody you absolutely have to have for Showdown because they're typically a lot less expensive. He was chalk going into the week, so he's +2. I have him down as a yes because now he's being criminally underrated. He's being overlooked because he started a little bit poorly, which is going to happen. It's golf, right? Like, I think that's something you have to keep in mind when you're playing Showdown golf, is that these guys are sometimes just going to suck because that's golf. That's the sport that you're betting on. It's extremely volatile. And, people are also emotional when they come to playing this because, like, they'll go, Steven Jaeger, he's screwing my lineups right now. I'm not playing him for Showdown today. Well, you know what? When he bounces back for you and you're all happy about Steven Jaeger for your 4-round lineups, I'm going to be even happier because I played him in Showdown today and took complete advantage of his ceiling round, right? So that's the idea there. And at the end of the week, the slapdicks don't even like know what happened to them, right? Because they're just happy that, you know, he had his like ceiling round and got himself back into contention for their 4-round lineups, not realizing that they could have also taken advantage of it on Showdown, right? They're blind to it sometimes. So yeah, I like it. I like it, Zach. He's one of those bounce back candidates that you want to get to. Let's talk through a few of these other 7K options. So we talked about Kitayama. I like KH Lee. He's always got a ceiling round in him. He loves himself an easy golf course too. And based on what we saw here for Friday, he's probably going to play on the easier side of the spectrum. So I could see myself getting there. Matt Wallace has elite course history and to this point has not shown it. So a guy that was a little bit chalky for 4-round contests that is now only 2.6% owned. So I like seeing that. Definitely somebody that I'm getting to in lineups. Let's see. Adam Svensson's been a little bit rough to this point, but I could see a bounce back there, kind of similar to a Steven Yeager. He's also $7,200. Troy Merritt is -1. He's always just lower owned than he should be. No one wants to play Troy Merritt, and I understand it. He's a boring guy. You hardly ever see him on the telecast unless he's in contention, but he's an extremely consistent player. So if I was playing cash, I'd almost for sure have Troy Merritt in that lineup. In terms of some 6K options, I do like Dylan Fratelli. And, you know, I kind of ragged on him just now. I was like, oh, he's only, you know, $100 more expensive than Lipsky. So sure, yeah, Lipsky probably a better play. But if you're looking for just somebody that's not going to be owned, right, 2.1% on a Dylan Fratelli, that is a better player than everyone wants to give him credit for, then take him. The deal with him is he's got to hit fairways. He's super long off the tee. That's something that a lot of people don't know about Dylan Fratelli. He's one of the longest players in this field, period. In fact, he's probably number 3 in the field when it comes to driving distance. Number 1's Cameron Champ. We know that. Xander's probably longer than Dylan Fratelli. And probably number 4. Cam Davis got him too. That's for sure. But Dylan Fratelli's up there. He was out driving Bryson a few times when they were playing together. So Dylan Fratelli's got some damn length. Don't forget about it. If he can hit fairways around this track, I mean, he's going to have wedge into almost every single hole. That's one of those shorter holes. And then the longer holes will have enough length to take care of them, right? To make par, move on to the next. I think he's got upside. That's what I'll say. Now, is he very likely to suck? Yes, because Dylan Fratelli is like the definition of volatility. He's unsteady. Just that's the best word. He's an unsteady player, but when you catch him on the right day, you're really glad that you did. Peter Malnati is that same sort of player, and he's playing even worse, but I'm willing to get there. You got to remember, you know, he's not going to win this golf tournament, but Peter Malnati, of anybody at the bottom of the leaderboard, and this could be for any golf tournament, not just this week at the ZOZO, Peter Malnati has the best head on his shoulders of anybody on the tour. If you've ever seen an interview with him, it jumps off the tape. His perspective on life is something that I wish I could emulate. And I think that pretty much anybody out there would want to emulate just because of how well he takes everything. He's still going to be trying. He's still going to be trying to amp up the crowd. It's kind of just the guy that Peter Malnati is. And time again, I play this guy in Showdown. He can be just out of the golf tournament. And again, he's not playing many no-cut events, right? So he's not normally in this situation here for Saturday. It's typically us playing him on a Friday after he shoots like +5 or 6 there on Thursday. But the same rule applies here, right? He might not make the cut. In this case, he might not end up making the top 10 to top 15, even if he has a ceiling round today and tomorrow, but he's going to try. I can guarantee you, I've just seen it before. Like he's been out of the cut and gone out there, shot 4 or 5 under par before, still missed the cut, yet go out there and have a ceiling performance for Showdown. So I'm a huge supporter of him for Showdown. I don't love playing him for 4-round contests. He hardly ever can put together 2, even 3 ceiling rounds on the same week, but you can almost always count on Peter Malnati having 1 ceiling round a week. I mean, maybe not per week, right? Over a 4-round sample size, right? Because a lot of times he's missing cuts, let's be honest. So don't want to run that past him. Outside of that, I mean, you got all these Japan tour players at the bottom. These Japanese superstars like Kita Nakajima. He's going to be highly owned though, so you probably don't want to get there. Players I'd consider: Takumi Kanaya. He played well here last year. Kazugi Higa. He played decently yesterday, but more importantly, he won last week, so he's kind of on a heater. Hiroshi Iwata shot well over par yesterday, but that was a little bit deceiving. He had plenty of birdies to go along with it. So if he cleans that up, he could have a round that you need in Showdown. And I guess that's it, right? I mean, outside of those 3 players, I mean, Yuto Kasa, Katsuragawa, he's a solid Japan Tour player. He played really well in round 1. So I think there's a little bit there with Yudo. Yeah, but outside of that, I'm not playing Kawamoto, Hoshino. They've looked pretty trash to this point. Ibahara, no chance. Aguri, Iwasaki, there's 0 chance that I'm playing them. Kaito, Onishi, 0 chance I'm playing them. Nayuki, Kaioka, 0 chance I'm playing them. By the way, I'm just saying the names because I want to say them. Mikumu Horikawa, I'm not playing him either. And by the way, I probably do a much better job than most people at those because I've taken a few foreign languages. So either way, I'm not playing many of them. I talked about the 3 that I actually do want to play. Outside of that, though, right, you've got Chalk and John Ha that there's no chance that I'm playing. You've got Chalk. I'm just going to point out the chalky pieces now. So we're not playing John Ha. That's for damn sure. He's not going to back that up. Adam Shank, we're not playing. We're not playing Andrew Putnam at -10. Ricky Fowler, there's 0 shot I'm playing. Matthew Neesmith's a fade. And that's about it. Those guys at the top of the board. I mean, we talked about it before, right? So let me go ahead and just sort this real quick. I'm going to sort this by score. Okay, custom sorts. Excuse me, give me 1 second to do this. This will be easy enough. There you go. Oh, wrong way around. I did smallest to largest. I don't know how that's... guess it didn't work. Okay, whatever. We'll scroll to the bottom of the leaderboard. Guys like Putnam, right, going to be way over-owned because of their score. Keegan, John Ha, Nakajima. He's going to be like 5 to 7% at the bare minimum price because of his score. You probably want to fade that. Ryder, Neesmith, even guys like Luke List, Joel Damon, and Shank here, like they're all going to be a solid 5% higher owned than they should be. Now, the guys that kind of make sense, are like a Hovland and Morikawa, right? Ryo Hitsutune, this sort of guy, right? Like you want to be fading these value picks that are up here because they're just as capable as all these guys at the bottom of the board of going out there and having a solid round. It's just that a few of them are being much higher end than the rest. And you can see me sorting my chart here completely broke everything. So let's just get off the spreadsheet here and go over the DraftKings now. Let's see what's going on down in chat. Delbert says Minotti is the ultimate showdown play and get scorching hot at any time. Yeah, that's pretty much what I say every week. He's just like the showdown hero. Sebastian Munoz is that same sort of way. I will always talk up Sebastian Munoz for showdown, pretty much regardless of golf course. Like those sort of players I'll take. Kurt Kitayama's that same kind of guy. Lipsky, Steven Yeager. Like we talked about a bunch of them on the live stream here. A couple of you asked questions about those players. I will always play them at Showdown. And again, I'm at least playing 20 lineups on every slate, if not 150 lineups. So me taking shots on those sort of players, like I can eat it when they suck. Like if they shoot +8 to +10, like I really don't care, right? Because I'm playing them in like 10% of lineups. But if they hit and you use them in 10 to 15% of lineups, I mean, that's how you win GPPs in Showdown. So yeah, I'm all for it. Sex says, what's up going on, Nick? You said he always screws you with Jaeger Bomb. You said Sack mentioning Jaeger Bomb is hilarious. Yeah, I gotta agree. It is kind of funny. And you're saying Jaeger and JJ Spawn are the guys who will go out there and randomly make 5+ birdies. JJ Spawn, yeah, I think you're onto something there too. I'm not against it. Antonio says, hey, Luke, have you talked about Hovland? I just joined. So yeah, I talked about him a little bit. I'll bring it up again, though. I have no issue doing so. So Hovland, he's going to be a little bit chalky, him and Morikawa, because of the rounds that they had. If I was going to take one of the two, I would just say that Morikawa is more likely to succeed just because he did it with the irons yesterday. And one thing we saw a lot of Hovland's round. He was one of the featured groups on the broadcast yesterday. I stayed up watching his entire round. He made a ton of putts. I mean, he made a few par putts that were from 10 to 15 feet. He made birdie putts from like 20 to 25 feet. He does that sometimes, right? I bet him outright. He's like one of my picks this week. I love to see it, right? But we can't count on that happening. That's just not Victor Holland. He's not a killer with the putter. So I like him, Antonio. I think he makes sense. Like I think he's a good play, but I like Morikawa a little bit more just because, he's a little bit more ball striking dependent. And that's always going to be a little bit more consistent. But let's talk about a few lineups together. So let me bring up right tab here and let's talk through a GBP build. So when I'm hand building lineups, this is the kind of thought process that I'm going through. And for this lineup specifically, we're going to do it imagining we're entering the large field GBP, right? The $20, I believe it's like 10K to first for round 3. I'll have to double check after I get off of here, but that sort of contest. always going to fade the chalk up top. So if you're looking to take a pivot, I talked about Sanjay, I talked about Matsuyama. If you're looking for a true pivot, you probably want to avoid a Hovland and a Morikawa to start. So let's start this with Hideki. I like the motivation factor. I like the fact that he's had a ton of success at this golf course. And he's the lowest owned option up top at this point. Now he's being overlooked because of his start. And I don't understand it, right? He's one shot behind Sanjay. He's only 2 behind Tom Kim. And it's not like he's being boat raced by Xander and these other 2 players, right? He's at even par. He's played, slightly above average for round 1, a little bit below average for round 2. Yeah, I think he's got it in him. So he's a pivot up top. He's going to give us a lot of flexibility to take chalk if we want to elsewhere. So let's go down to our second man in, which I ideally want to live at the bottom of the 9K range. I think that's a good sweet spot here. Talked about Fleetwood. He makes quite a bit of sense. If you wanted to get really wacky, take Mito Pereira. But let's be a little bit more traditional about it. Go ahead and click in Tommy Fleetwood. Third man in, I want to use an 8K option because there's so many that I like. Thigala, we got Munoz down here. I guess he's a 7K option, technically at $7,900, but I like these sort of players quite a bit. So let's go ahead and click in Thigala. Let's go ahead and use Munoz too, and that puts us at $7,300. And with these first 4 picks, we've taken 4 pivots, right? Single digit on guys like Thigala. Fleetwood's right around like 12 to 13%. You have 17% owned Hideki Matsuyama. If we wanted to take chalk with our last 2 spots, we probably could. But at least for me, I'm okay taking pivots at all 6. It's Showdown. It's volatile as all hell. We have no idea what the hell is going to happen over an 18-hole sample size. So if I'm just taking 6 players that I really like for today that have that upside in them, and they're all low owned, that's what I'm looking for, right? Particularly if you're not playing 150 lineups. If you're only playing like 20 lineups, then be crazy about it. Be a little bit outlandish because you want as much leverage to the field as you can get. So, and if you're hand building, by the way, and you're building GPP lineups, you're probably not 150 maxing, right? Because that's why you're hand building. Be a little bit more, I don't want to say crazy about it, but be a little bit daring about it. That's what I would recommend if you're not entering a bunch of lineups. So for these last 2 spots, let's take a few pivots. Let's take Kitayama. And then down here in the 6K range, let's put Iwata, or we could even let's spend up a little bit. So instead of taking $7,800 Kurt Kitayama, let's go up here. Let's add Sepp Straka, another player who's going to be relatively low owned, and we'll go a little bit further in the 6K range and take like a Dylan Fratelli, for example. You could take Fratelli, you could take Yuto Katsuragawa if you wanted to, David Lipsky at $6,500. This sort of lineup is what you're ideally looking for in these large field GPPs. Now, if you're in a 2 to 3 max, you don't have to be as differentiated here. Those are the type of contests where I like getting to like a Colin Morikawa. I mentioned I think he's maybe the best play on the slate, but when you consider ownership, it detracts from that a little bit. So I wouldn't mind taking him if you were considering this for a 2 to 3 max or a single entry like I was mentioning, or even a Sungjae, right? He's slightly higher owned than what we had with a few of those other players, but I'd be willing to take him in smaller field contests. It's not nearly as big of a deal. Can't take as aggressive of an approach if you're going to do that, right? You have $6,800 remaining, but you're still able to make a competitive lineup here. You could take Takumi Kanaya there at $6,400 and polish it off with your favorite option there at $7,300. So that's what I'm thinking when it's coming to a GPP or one of the smaller field GPPs that you might be entering. When it comes to cash, maybe you start Morikawa and Hovland. You just take those 2 guys there. In terms of the 8K options, let's see. There's not a ton of chalk in the 8K range, truth be told. It's a little bit more spread out than most of the other ranges. So maybe you go and try and take another 9K option. You put a Cam Young in there, that sort of thing. In terms of a core 4 for cash, let's see. Let's get a 4th guy in there. Not going to use Ricky Fowler in cash. That's just asking to get nut punched using Ricky Fowler in a cash lineup, right? Just seems like an oxymoron there. Let's see. Maybe Lipsky, right? Maybe Lipsky, because he's so underpriced, is one of your cash core 4. So when it's coming to a cash lineup, these are the 4 guys I'd build behind, right? Because you have that one way underpriced value pick, and you have these 3 9K options that are the best scores in the field when it comes to Showdown that are all towards the top of the leaderboard. In a GPP, though, there's zero chance I would play these 4 players together. Zero chance, right? Even though I think all of them are decent plays today and you could take them, they're all chalk for their ranges. There's just no chance. I'm going to set a rule in my player pool on my optimizer to make sure that that doesn't happen. So just understand that this is for a cash contest, right? Completely different set of rules that we're going with there. And that is the thought process. Let's catch up on chat before we hop into the prize pick stuff. So let's see what's going on. Nick says, hey, watch your mouth about hand builders. Hey, I have no issues with the hand builders out there. It's just y'all think a little differently with your lineups. It's just okay. Sometimes it works out. I've been doing it for NFL. I've been telling you about that, right? I've had a lot of success with NFL hand building of late. Let's see. Have they uploaded the golf board yet? They have not. Dude, like, it's kind of a joke at this point. Golf starts in 5 hours, and we still don't have the golf board up. And then Live has been over for, at this point, like 6-7 hours at this point, too, and it's still not up. Come on, Prize Picks. Get it together. I was really hoping to be able to do this on stream this time, but I guess they're slacking off. That is all I've got for this stream, though, boys. Hopefully, you guys are hopefully you're a little bit more prepared for tonight's slate. We can win some money, get some extra cash for Sunday for NFL. My 4-round contest, I need a few big performances from value picks. A lot of my elite tier options are smacking at this point, are just going out there, doing the things I need them to. I have a lot of Xander, plenty of guys like Amore, Cabo, and Hovland, right? They were core picks for me. They're up there in like the top 10 at this point. I like what I'm getting from my core picks, just not so much from my values. I don't have Ricky Fowler. I have John Hull in my player pool. I do have to say that. That was nice to see. I got to get a few ceiling performances. So hopefully we can get that today. It's moving day, so there's going to be ceiling rounds out there. Just need them to happen for our sort of guys. But best of luck with all of your round 3 lineups, any prize pick slips that you're going with. If you want my prize picks analysis, it will be on my Patreon. I wanted to do it on here, but still no boards posted. So get it together, prize picks, like I said. Hopefully they're watching. They can get it together a little bit, get a little bit of fire under their ass, get it together. But until then, guys, best of luck, and let's get it.